Hi everyone, Jake Elliott, and welcome to The Framework. I'm your host, your heresy hunter, your hypercritic, your demon slayer, destroyer, apostle, and prophet. And with me today, I've got the wonderful Eric Peterson, and we're going to be talking on a very controversial but very important discussion that needs to happen in church. Come on, church, wake up and smell the abuse. It's everywhere, and it's taken how many years? A lot of us have known about this since the 80s, 90s, noughties to now. And we've got an epidemic. There is so much abuse. It's not just SA, it's financial abuse, it's spiritual abuse, it's social abuse, it's prophetic abuse. There's all different types of abuse that take its toll. And I play that song at the beginning just so you can just get an idea and flavor of just some forms, because it is rampant. And I can't wait to get into the questions, but before I do, g'day, Eric.
Hey, Jake, how are you, mate?
Good, thanks, mate. So we're not going to be
A
doing the typical
question,
warning sign, but yeah.
just a quick question. I'm listening to you on about a 30, 40-second delay as well.
Did that just start?
I can't wait to get into the questions and talk to Eric.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm just going to do something quickly.
I don't know if the guys online are hearing that either.
Okay, so let's see how this goes. I've got some new audio tech as well, so let me know if the audio improves or does not improve. Weird how we just had a weird disconnection as soon as we hit that live button, potentially. A few questions, a few comments. Hey, Deb, just saw you introduced chat. That song is my life story. Great. It's great to see that song's ministering to someone. But we're not going to be doing the warning, folks, because of the nature of this interview. I'll be putting up a little link at the bottom of it, telling people to watch out, to comment on my live streams, in case you're the first time coming to my channel. Because if you do comment, anyone can see your name or your account name and figure out what church you go to. So just be mindful of that. Aside from that, though, we've got a stack of questions lined up for our guest, Eric Peterson. And before we start, though, tell us a bit about yourself, Eric.
Well, I'm 57 now. I've made it here, which is pretty good. Some folks might have seen that the voices wouldn't have liked me to have come this far, but I managed, and I'm going to go all the way, breathing to the grave by the grace of God. I don't know what there is to say, really. It's strange. I grew up a bit weird. I was adopted at birth. I'm part of a whole bunch of the sort of stolen generation from New Zealand to Australia in the 60s and 70s. They were doing the reverse. They were sending their kids over here. I'm just trying to think now. I grew up in a normal sort of Sydney neighbourhood. My parents were old, so I grew up with an alderman.
And he's gone. Yep. And he's gone again. Red light, green light. We tested everything before we started. It was all good. Maybe someone's calling him. Okay, so I'll be asking him the question, can you describe the circumstances surrounding your experience of SA within the church? Just so we can get more of the context. He's back. Let's see if it works this time. I can see you, but you seem a bit frozen. The audio is more important, though. Let's see if we can just get this thing going.
I'm doing my Aboriginal dance, bro. Now, what was that girl at the Olympics?
Yeah.
A Ray-Ban or some crap?
I'm surprised they didn't test it for drugs.
Anyway, I sort of grew up in a normal neighbourhood in Sydney. You know, there was nothing weird about that until you get a bit older and you become a bit of a target to the local predators or rock spiders, we used to call them back in the day. And that disrupted my life completely. It screwed me up at school. And of all things, I sought sanctuary in the church, and boo, it happened there as well. So I really started to get confused about life, the world and what Christianity was supposed to be and what I was being shown, and stumbled through life and had a mental breakdown in 2005. So that's not too bad. We moved up here to Kempsey. We live in the bush now, which is so good. Let me tell you, trees are therapy. Kicking a rock in the ground and swearing at it really does you good now and then when you're cranky. You know, there's lots of things that are beneficial when you can't deal with people being around. I just don't trust people, you know. It's a sad thing, but that's life, you know. I live isolated by choice, but it's pretty cool. I've had Chris Roseberry drop by. He stayed here for a while. That was pretty good. Put him to sleep with a good Aussie drink. Boom. And rest in peace, David dropped in. Well, he passed away too. He dropped in with his newborn baby. So that was really cool. David Cathy and his lady and their baby. And so that was cool. Apart from that, man, you will be the next visitor.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, we get the locals to drop in because it's funny. Where I live now, it's called the Bronx. It is the worst part of Kempsey. And I figured, why not buy somewhere where you're going to have an impact? So we did. We just thought, stuff it. And it's really good. We know everybody here and they kind of call me uncle. They know I'm cranky. See?
Don't be dead.
I come with the warning. You know, my wife tells people, she says, my husband doesn't get cranky, he gets happy. You know, so when he's happy, that's when you've got to be worried.
Nice.
And yeah, and so yeah, and then it wasn't until I came up here and after I'd fallen apart after all that Royal Commission stuff and all that, that I actually sought help. And that was the hardest thing, was to actually reach out. Shit, after about 30, 40 years of being abused, looking for help. People kind of look at you funny, you know. Should be over that by now, shouldn't you? You know, the old Australian, she'll be right, mate. Just, you know, put your boots on, do your laces up, you'll get over it. I thought I did.
Yeah, we actually met around the time of the Royal Commission as well. I met a few of you around that time period.
Yes.
And it's been a
Kerry
privilege ever
Ferguson.
since. Yeah.
Yeah, you, me, and Kerry, that's how we met.
Mm-hmm.
It's your fault again. You know,
Always my fault.
you seem to be in the middle of picking up us weirdos, mate. You want to watch out. You get a name for yourself.
I'm post heresy and everyone's problem.
I know you've been causing a bit of a stir.
Everyone's problem.
You've been causing a bit of stir lately, haven't you?
My life is a complete stir. As soon as you associate with Jake Elliott, you can imagine something's going to go up.
Do you know what? Just going off to the left a bit there. It is really good to see somebody else doing it because it doesn't make me feel as guilty for not anymore. I just can't deal with them, man. I've had enough. You know, it's like every time I hear Brian Houston's voice, it's like some old school teachers dragging a nails down the chalkboard, reminding me how bad life is.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really good. I don't know how people like Chris Roseberry deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't know either.
Ken Silver, it took his toll on Ken. And I have a very similar brain to Ken. We're wired kind of similar. And that's why when I withdrew from that stuff, man, life became good again. You see, that was,
You brought up Ken.
You know,
he's one of my mentors.
He was a legend. I was reading his stuff when I was coming out of the NAR. And Chris and you guys are all still sort of the enemy, you know? You guys, you religious spirits, all you Pharisees. Gosh, it was funny. And I'm reading Ken Silver's articles going, who is this guy? And then I meet up with you, and then I met up with Chris, and I was talking to Chris one day about something I read. And then, the penny dropped to me and Chris have been good mates since. You know, I'm a bit nutty like Ken, apparently. So that's a good thing. I'll take that and embrace it. What do they say? A bit of a hippopotamus in the garden, mate. That was Ken.
Pay no attention to the hippopotamus behind the rose bush.
Yeah. Forget about the boar. We've already had the boar in the vineyard. We need a hippo in the garden again, mate.
Hmm. So you've kind of touched on that a little bit regarding, but like in this interview, we're not going to be talking about what happened to Eric. That might be a
Nah,
future interview.
yes,
All we want to do in this
definitely.
interview is just talk about the effects of SA and the traumatic experiences or the emotions and or the sociological impacts that happen. And Eric has touched on that a little bit, but going back to one of the questions, what kind of emotional and psychological effects have you carried with you since the abuse? Have you been
Always
diagnosed?
wanting to be, you know, there was a song, I think it was Ian Dury and the Blockheads, "You will always find me in the kitchen at the party." I was always was isolated, always doing something, keeping myself busy because I just didn't want to be in a room full of people looking over my shoulder. And that's what you become, suspect of everybody until kind of like discernment, you fine tune. You know what I mean? And then I don't know. Yeah, emotionally, I just shut down. It was, I remember not so much as a youth, but it was when I finally came out, like when you said the Royal Commission, when I came forward too, that was when everything went absolutely upsy downtown, mate, because that was 36 years after sort of the events. And when I opened up that can of worms in here, oh my gosh,
Okay, so
it was
maybe a bit of a timeline here. When did the abuse happen, and when was you mentioned 2005, didn't you? That was when you first had a traumatic experience or
um,
breakdown.
no. 2005 was when I had a mental breakdown. That was when I found out I was adopted.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so what year roughly, so we
That,
can get an idea how
um,
long you've had it for?
it was when I was 14. I'm 57. What's the math? 43 years ago now, right?
Wow,
And it was about 2016 after I heard Kerry's testimony,
47 years.
right?
That's wow. Yeah.
No, not 47, 43. 43, I was 14, so it's 43 years ago. And when I heard Kerry's testimony and listened to the stuff that happened with her, something happened. You know what I mean? And that was around the time too. Remember that fella, the Jewish guy that was abused in Melbourne?
Yeah,
He
roughly.
became, yeah, he became very famous. Travelled between here and Australia as the Jewish community sought to hide the abuse. I became friends with him, and it stirred something in me to speak up because these
Mm.
people are old enough still to be active, you know. And when you see creeps like Alan Jones at 83 finally being
Mm.
jailed, you know there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry to mention that, but you know what I mean. For me, when I saw that, I was happy.
Yeah.
And then I
Me
saw his
too.
22-year-old boyfriend and a couple of years back nearly threw up. I thought, ooh, you know, and that's another issue too, is because it's so acceptable in public, you do isolate yourself on purpose because you don't want to go to movies. You don't like, I tried to go out a few times and you go out and guys would hit on you. And your initial response is to bust their teeth out. But you know that that's not the right thing to do. And so you say, no, listen, man, I'm here with a lady. What are you doing? You know? And that was one of the interesting things post abuse too. It's like you become a target. And I think something's happened spiritually with that. It might be a wild idea for some people, but I think you become like a target.
A spiritual target. Yeah, okay.
That guy knew that I'd been abused. He knew there was an avenue of possibly I'll get this guy. And it was like, it was weird. It was strange. And until I busted out and actually came out and just, you've read the report, I sent it to you. It's not very nice. That was when I didn't care anymore. You know, it was very freeing. But my body, my mind, my emotions just couldn't cope with it. So,
Wow.
yeah. And then I struggled. And so I hit the bottle. That's how I coped with it mostly, was I hit the bottle for a few years until I walked into a doctor's office and said, I need help. And he freaked because he was a brother in Christ. Never knew.
Yeah.
So that was
And Christians
really,
do freak out.
he was pretty cool because being my doctor, he was couldn't say anything. And there was an incident that had happened, I think it was 2 or 3 years prior, at the church that I'd been in fellowship with 10 years, where I was used as a pawn and accused of grooming kids. My doctor knows the full truth. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And see, that's one of the things that
Targeted again. Interesting.
it's the unresolved issues that give you the most. Like if somebody has abused me and I find out they're dead, it cuts off a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? It resolves the issue. It's a final. It's. I'm not looking for these people to apologise. They need to be accountable for what they did in the positions of leadership, especially those in the church, for what they did. What they did to me is inconsequential. That's the second part of it. Their first part is their accountability to God.
While you honk,
And
I'll just give some context as well.
yeah,
Regarding some what Australians often think about this topic. Now, the scriptures does say that the Gentiles blaspheme the church because not even they do the things that you are doing. That's how bad I think we are now in the church. We are not dealing with some of the most despicable things that even in Australia. Like Australia's pretty crass. It's pretty liberal in its language and its vulgarities in the public place. But this
yeah.
is the number one thing you just don't cross. And one thing I remember was Wendy calling into there was the Ray Adley show, and she was in the middle of all the controversy with Frank Houston and Brian Houston and the Royal
Wendy
Commission.
Chapman.
Yeah.
2015, she called Ray Hadley. I've got the audio.
I did too. And she was like, "Oh, I
Mm.
love Frank Houston. He's an amazing man of God." And she called in and she received the wrath of viewers. Adley was just furious. One lady rang in, she was a grandmother. She said, she said something along the lines, "It's better to be murdered than to actually go through something like this and live with this for the rest of your life." And I thought that was a fascinating insight. And what are your thoughts on that? Because what I'm hearing is you're just always now a target. You always feel vulnerable. You just cannot trust people anymore. I think people would even suggest that it's almost like a curse. I'm not saying you're cursed, obviously, but
it changes as you get older, as you're dealing with it. Said twice I tried to end it, and by the grace of God, I was unsuccessful. And yeah, well, see, let's go from that. That's 18, let's say 19, 20 years later. As you said, I was in Melbourne and I was receiving the news that I was adopted over the phone while sitting at work on the 11th floor with the window open, wondering what it'd be like to jump out. So, in the middle of a mental breakdown, that's the kind of news I got. And I'm like, these weird stories always happen to me. And the lady, she was as sweet as, her name was Barbara. And I explained to her my situation. And how on earth could she tell me over the phone that I was adopted? And I said, don't bother calling the police. I said, because I'll be out that window before they even get here. And she changed. Dude, this was hilarious, Jake. She was a bloody Christian. Her vocabulary changed. And I said to her, I said, you're a Christian, aren't you? And she goes, I said, your verbiage. I said, you're could you say hello to your pastor for me? Quiet. And I said, I've known Mike Dennis since I was a young boy. He cared for me when many others wouldn't come near me. I said, you tell Mike Eric's finished with this suicide shit. I said, thank you very much for the information. And right there and then, that was the end of the ending
Yep.
it, because Mike was the guy that walked me through being abused in one part of my life. And that was amazing. And I thought, wow. And he's passed on now, which is cool. And that's another reason why I came forward, because it was his daughter who was abusing us kids in church. You know, and I'm trying to deal with this whole concept of, you know, Jesus loves me, this I know. But the youth group leaders abused me. So it was like, how do you deal with this? And then you have Mike. It was so messed up, dude. But, you know,
Yep.
God in his
I'm
grace.
starting to get messed up myself hearing this.
Yeah, but God in his
Can I just put a
grace.
disclaimer in first? Because, folks, this is not me wanting to get as much information as I can out of Eric because of that entire Alan Jones things. We were just talking behind the scenes, and Eric did say, I would like to talk about this. So please don't think I'm doing this for anything else rather than just wanting his story out there. He's saying what he wants to say freely, and I'm just going to give him
Absolutely.
that platform. So I want to just put that out there.
But I'll
because
keep it lighthearted too in that,
no, this
because
is
I'm not going
fine.
to, because
I do want
the
I
thing
do
that,
want people to understand. This is just something personal to me because I have dealt with victims, and I want people to just
oh,
realize the mind and the heart, the emotions. You were talking about the social engagement, pulling back, feeling like everyone's looking over your shoulder. I can't even begin to
yep.
imagine what that would be like going to a church ever again. Because
It made it easy in the transition when I left church at that stage. I left church fairly young, so I moved straight into dealing drugs because I was used to looking over my shoulders, and I lived a quiet life. And so I became a bit of a nasty drug dealer too, as I was dealing with. It was, how do they say it? The old peachy keen Pentecostal text. It was me outwardly manifesting an inward problem. Heck yeah, you know what I mean. I was trying to stay alive, all that, and I told nobody. You see, the pastor knew about the abuse that I went through with the Scouts. But nobody else for 37 years knew about the rest, you know? And so, yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. But my heart breaks for the people that they may be possibly still in contact, because what was it? It was years later, after I'd been dealing drugs, and I got out, you know, but for the grace of God, I'm still alive, because you don't leave those kind of gangs with their permission usually. And I quit that, and then I put myself in the care of a church because I thought that's what you could do. And off I go again. I was 20, I think, this time, but because I was coming off the alcohol, the amphetamines, I was a speed junkie. And I loved to smoke weed back then because it was the only thing that could detach me from what there was an angry man in me, and it kept that thing down. And so after that, what was I? Pretty much, oh crikey! I still stayed within that church for a few more years. None of them, none of those people in that church knew about it till I went back to the head of that denomination of Australia, who was the pastor of that local church at the time, and told him what had happened to me. Now, this is where it really upsets me, Jake, is because he rang the perpetrator. I gave him the perpetrator's details. And he spoke to the perpetrator. The perpetrator denied it. And that's as far as he took it. Again, there is a misuse of his authority as a leader and an example in Christ there, man, because he should have mandatory reporting, regardless of my age. I was under their care in a mission house, rehabilitating from drugs. I gave him the opportunity. That's what I did. I actually drove up to Coffs Harbour, where the head of the denomination is, the big church up there, and spoke to him face to face. And he gave me all the usual cuddles, hoo-ha, and, oh, let me pray for you and all that kind of crap. And then 3 days later, he gives me that. Oh, I've spoken to so-and-so, and, he denied that that's what happened, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and so I think it was 12 years later, I ran into that perpetrator's wife and 2 kids. He got married and had 2 kids. And I said, where is he? She said, I wouldn't let that do it near my kids.
Yeah.
She had 2 boys.
Yeah.
And the thing that upsets me, again, let's move on to the police, how they dealt with it, man. They don't care.
We shouldn't go there.
Okay,
we've talked.
I'll save that for a later
apologies
date.
for that. This is probably going to be controversial enough as it is.
Okay, we'll save that for a later
resource.
date. But yeah, let's just say they don't have the resources to deal with it in Australia. They haven't got it. End of story. They can't. We've all seen it, what's been in the media, let alone what hasn't made it. You know what I mean? So when I got confirmation regarding all that sort of hitting a wall per se, that was when I lost my. That was when they medicated me up here.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting because I think I was 55 and I was getting into fights again. I turned up to my doctor, man, with this tripping big black eye. And I just looked at him. I said, Ruben, I've got a problem, man. I said, that anger's coming out that we've spoken about. And we talked about things. We tried certain things because what we found out in the end, we were dealing with somebody who's I got no serotonin up here, man. And so all my life, I've not been able to have that natural joy. And so you substitute it. And so these guys finally work out that Zoloft was the magic one for me. Because it's very, very similar to magic mushrooms. That's another story. And it works. But what it does again is it put my emotions attached to me. And so, oh man, I was close to getting locked up. People were back chatting me because where I do live, we're constantly dealing with people that are on meth and crack and stuff like that. And sometimes when they go you, I ain't got it in me to back down. And so with all that anger, I had this one poor fellow, I ragdolled him around, and that was when I realised I got problems. And fortunately, I've caught up with Budge and we've sorted it. We don't have a problem now. We dealt with it. It's over and done with. But when you can grab a grown man and just ragdoll him around, you've got issues. And so, I went through the whole treatment. Then they tried. They talk a lot.
Psychologist. Counselor.
Yeah, because they wanted to see what was going on. And the first thing, and he said to me, he says, have you ever been diagnosed with, what was it? ADHD. And because he said to me, he says, you are a classic example of somebody who is off the charts. And there's my puppies. And so I said to him, I said, no. I said, but I do know that back in 1976, they wanted to put me on Ritalin as a child. And he looked at me. And we worked out, and that was where him and my doctor worked out the whole serotonin thing and all this kind of stuff. But he was detached. And this is the biggest problem. You got people that are worse off than me. Where do they go? You know, here I am at what? I'm in my 57s. Yeah, to the cross is the only place. But that's the problem too, because the cross that many hold now is tainted. It is not the cross of Christ. And so these people are, and as you're seeing now, what is it? There's people in the news, big news, that they're seeking and hiding from their own very family because they feel like they're going to get knocked off. And these are people in the church, and it's all public. And you think the church is supposed to be a sanctuary where people, damaged folk like me and others, can come and seek healing. You know, Christ has that for us.
Yeah. I don't call it the cross of Christ. I call it the neon cross, because they want to dance around it and hide their sins with this,
dude,
behind this facade of Christianity. It's horrible.
After I met you, that was when I spent a bit of time with Chris, and we talked and went through a lot of this stuff because he knew what a mental case I was at the moment. And we did that conference. Do you remember that?
Yeah, my gosh, it was unforgettable. We spoke, Kerry
Ghost stories.
spoke, not a dry eye in the room.
It was awesome. It was so good to catch up with everybody there.
It was healing.
But Chris was wild. He didn't know what I was going to talk about. We just called it Ghost Story. And we just chased rabbit holes. It was so funny. We talked about leg lengthening. We touched on a little bit about abuse, but it was more so the weird that happens behind the scenes. And all this time, I'm dealing with this stuff in here. Like, you know, I'm in leadership in Vineyard. I'm in leadership in Foursquare. I'm in leadership roles in all these churches. And they didn't ask, care, or even bother to sort of look into who I was or where I was at. It was just that
Are you talking about the Vineyard movement that was meeting in power evangelism, signs, wonders, and healings, and prophetic words, where they were able to understand people's backgrounds and backdrops?
Yeah. I was involved in actually helping establish the Vineyard movement in Australia. We were one of the first church plants, nearly. It was an interesting time, and that stuff messed me up even more too, because you think about it, young fella, the Baptists, they're pretty staunch, standoffish, don't hug, don't dance, or you're going to be doing the lambada in the bed later that night kind of thing.
That's the devil. Yeah.
So they're not very touchy-feely. And so I've come in I was in the Pentecostal church for a little while, but the one that I was in was a bit more old school. Into the Vineyard, where everybody's kissing and hugging everybody and everything. And it was weird. It was really freaky weird, because what it started to do, it was messing me up again, man, because people wanted to come and touch me and hug me if I was upset or something. And I'm like, first person ever hugged me as a Christian. I turned around and said to him, you do that again, I'll deck you.
Yeah.
So you don't be doing that stuff, man.
The real hippie movement back then was pretty promiscuous, and I reckon they brought a lot of that kind of.
I think it still was in the 90s, man.
Yeah,
it was still there. It was still there. It may not have been happening physically, but there was a whole thing happened spiritually. We called it sensual Christianity.
Yeah, I remember that.
You think about that. Oh man! Now I'm sorry, folks, if I'm not reading this thing. Well, they didn't do that in the Toronto Vineyard. It was it was horrible.
Just a heads up, folks. Apologies in
yes.
advance if there is a bit of an explicit piece of language to my American audience. We are Australian.
Oh,
We're doing
yes.
our best to make sure that the
I'll pull
language
it
is
back.
clean.
Oh, sorry, mate.
So let me know if you want me to clean this up a bit later as well because of those things, but I'm happy to keep it raw and real.
But I did have some ministry in the vineyard, which was really good. They dealt with the generational curses that I had. And,
Oh, fantastic.
So I was fine until I found out I was adopted, and I felt ripped off and thought I need to go back for a second round because I wasn't generationally anybody that they prayed for, see, because I was adopted.
Exactly. So, oh my gosh, you've got the spirit of adoption. You got Northern spirit. That's even worse. Did they break that off?
Always. Because I'd never given my money because they always thought I was broke. It was none of their business what I had, They always thought everybody wanted to pray this poverty thing over me, break that poverty spirit, but it does nothing. I remember there were lots of tears. Remember when the Toronto stuff first started? It first started off with tears and supposed healing, and we're all on the floor. I was part of it.
Tears of joy, yes.
Crying,
Mhm.
yeah. And then it started. That's when the dogs and the weird howling and the freaky people. We had people bending over backwards in church once. Oh my gosh, that was freaky. But yeah, see, we got in contact with that nonsense. This will do you Americans' heads in there. You guys all know when the Toronto hit Airport Vineyard in 94. Well, it hit the east coast of Australia in October 93, the year before as well, and was already active in Australia in some of these churches, already destroying us. And so there was no Christ in that whole vineyard thing, but it was pretty good. It was fun. It's a blast, man. There is a power in it, and if you're in the right places, you get treated really well, and got to meet Kevin Prosh and the boys, when they did their shows, their prophetic conferences, and rubbing shoulders with all the people that aren't in the vineyard anymore. Out of 160 plus churches in Australia, I think there's 12 left.
Yep, I've heard
That's called flogging a dead horse, mate.
Absolutely.
Jake, was when I caught up with you guys. I started spending time with Rose Bro, and I started to get an understanding of what Christ had done for me. Wasn't anything I could do for him. So I had this whole, as John Wimber used to say, paradigm shift, yet again, where I had to start rereading, relearning, and even just to understand the Bible and how it applied to me. And that in itself brought more freedom than going to any psychiatrist or a kumbaya weekend, even though they are lovely and you do need them. Seriously, man, one of the best things with this kind of stuff is support from people who have been abused, but also who haven't and have a heart to help you, because
absolutely,
they're coming from a different angle, and we need that, because it damages you. You know what I mean? The greatest grace that I have is the missus. You see, in that my wife was a nurse. She was a nurse, nearly 20 years. Great in that area, but when it comes to being compassionate in regards to understanding somebody's emotional state when he wants to rip a tree out of the ground because he's angry, she's learned just to walk away because she knows he's not going to rip the tree out of the ground, but he'll deal with whatever it is there and then and not try and fix me. And that's one of the biggest joys that I've ever had, bro, is having people in my life that ain't there to try and fix me. I'm not a project. We're not projects that need to be fixed. We're
You're not a
people that just
selfie
need to be
either. Oh,
around.
look,
Hey, a
you're not a
what?
selfie either. I used to work in the disability sector, and the number of times you get social justice warriors come in, get a few photos, and then
Oh,
not last even 6 months. It's awful to see how people kind of just swan in, swan out, and nothing's changed.
that's all it is. We just want to be around people.
We want
And
to feel normal in your
we
skin.
are,
Exactly.
and honestly, that some of us may heal, some of us may never heal at all, but we're not that dangerous, you know? We really aren't. And we're really good to have around when it hits the fan. You push us out the front and we'll lose it on anybody for you,
Absolutely.
you know? But yeah,
Mm.
and that's one of the joys of having a sense of humour too, mate. That has helped me
Mm.
survive all these years. And the dear lady that I dealt with, the detective that looked after. How's this? I had one detective. This was a blessing from God. One detective that dealt with 3 cases years apart, but all in the same shire. And she was the best. Do you know what I mean? Because she understood. Honestly, man, you read the interview that I went through with her, and it was fantastic. And that was one of the biggest keys when I let that drop and got that all out of my system, and somebody sat there and didn't try and fix me. You know, and it was interesting to see. I saw 3 coppers at different stages crying too because it was shit.
Oh,
It was horrible.
it's
You know, so and I'm still friends with her. She's left the force now, and so I still keep in contact. I'll send her a Chrissy card, her and a hubby. So a friendship that was created out of that. You know what I mean? It's weird,
yeah.
but and that's one of the biggest struggles we're going to have because it's rampant. It is worse now than it ever is. People don't want to talk about it,
Even
but
after it's come
also
out, they don't want to talk about it.
no, they're like ostriches, man. They got their
Yep.
heads that far down in the sand. They ain't hearing anything. But in the meantime, where do we take these people? And that was one thing that I had in this community because I've actually taken people myself to the police and supported them through the same shit.
Well, you can actually look at. We can blame the leaders as much as we want, but the worst people are the people that are now aware of what's going on with the Frank Houston or a Mike Bickle, and they don't do anything. And they claim to love God and they claim to worship God. They raise their hands up on a Sunday, thinking it's all good, when it's actually the Christian's job to make disciples and just love your enemies or
Love
love your
people.
friends or love those that are unlovable and
Yep.
just make them feel human, make them feel like
Yep.
they're validated for
And
just
see,
being who they are. And it's just the,
did
the
you see that, mate?
coldness. The look, can I
I
just say a
I
few
went
things
through
here from a
that
scriptural point of
process.
view? Jesus actually said that in the
Yep.
last days, the love of many will grow cold. And we are seeing that, not in the world. The world wants to do something about this. The church, the people that claim to love God and love
Yep.
neighbor and want to be a witness to the world, they don't care about God. They don't care about being a positive witness. They don't even care about their neighbor. When something like this happens, don't interrupt their feel good Sunday or their feel good week, because it's hard enough. It is already with a mortgage or something like that. Like there's just no concept that maybe God wants us to go above and beyond. We hear that phrase all the time in Christianity, but we've reduced it down to giving money rather than actually going above and beyond and loving your
Yeah.
neighbor or people in the community that are really struggling. And that's where I believe we've really dropped the ball. And it really
Yes.
just infuriates me. I've been saying the
Yep.
most powerful thing that could have happened at Hillsong, for instance, with Frank Houston and the victims, is just having people in their congregation going, well, a part of the Ministry of Reconciliation, let's have a special fundraiser, raise as much money as we can among all of our
Yep.
campuses to see what we can actually do. Just to say, is, it, is this is this good?
See,
Nothing. Cold.
I
And I'm so
I
upset
was
about
in
this.
I was in Frank's church in 1996 asking questions. Is Frank Houston a pedophile? Because they are the rumours that I'm hearing around Balkan Hills. and Castle Hill, and that was as a leader in the vineyard, right? And I got shut down real quick. I got told by my leaders that, no, they're looking into that and they're dealing with that. It's okay, you don't need to worry about that. So you know what I mean? It was, even while I was falling apart at the seams, I was still helping people
Yeah.
that have been abused. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Well,
I
someone who's
got
gone through it,
dragged
it's easy to see it.
How's this? This will give you. Here you go. Here's a prime example of the care factor. It was 1996. I can't tell you the month. It was a 2 or 3 day conference with Andy Comiskey from Living Waters, not anything to do with that other guy, Ray, Comfort, right? Andy Comiskey is not allowed in Australia anymore. I don't know why. He's no longer here. He was at Hillsong, Frank Houston's church. And one of my friends at the time was hearing impaired, basically deaf and all that sort of stuff. And they sucked her into going into a 10-week course after that because she wanted to be free from the lifestyle that she was currently in because she knew it wasn't what God wanted her. And they charged her $1,250. And every Monday night, I'd sit down for an hour and try and help her understand the verbiage and the wordage that she was seeking freedom, right? She's seeking freedom in Christ, and they give her this course. And I ended up losing the biscuits, man. Crazy, but she got her $1,250 back.
Good.
And that's all I wanted. They weren't even going to give her her money back, but that's what they offered her. Somebody seeking freedom, going to cost you $1,250, love. What? Do you know what I mean?
We've got a saying here in Australia, thanks to the Centrelink: support the system that supports you. And unfortunately, we have in the church this idea that, okay, they're going to be supporting us. No, they want you to support them without them supporting you, and they know it.
Yep. They want your money.
And before we continue, you mentioned it in passing in another interview we did, but I think it's a good time since you're talking about Vineyard. Also, with IHOP Kansas City, maybe unpack it a bit more with Misty Edwards and the other worship leader that came down to Australia doing stuff. Can you unpack that? Because you know some stuff that was going on around Manly and Brookvale. I want American listeners to hear that again.
Well, that was, oh gosh, I can't remember the year of the conference. It may have been around the same time as that one I just spoke of in 96. And there was a prophetic worship conference put on by Kevin Prosh and his band. And we all went there, and Kevin was pretty friendly with the guys at Randwick Baptist, Randwick Baptist as well, right? 20 years after all this vineyard stuff, I'm living here in Kempsey. I meet a guy that remembered me from Randwick Baptist back then, and we become mates. And he told me some stories that I thought were just nonsense. But no, Kevin and the boys used to go and play at the Coogee Bay under the name the Black Peppercorns because that was his side label. Apart from his worship band, he had a secular band called the Black Peppercorns, and they used to do gigs around Coogee and get absolutely knockered. Red-nosed, baby. They loved it. And see, that was already then when people were starting to question, like you said, with Misty and Kevin, and just some of their behaviors was weird. And that was when David Ruiz disappeared. That's a name that not many people may remember, but he was also very prominent in a lot of the Vineyard stuff. And he just disappeared from Vineyard. He didn't want nothing to do with it anymore. So he knew something as well. But as usual, what they do is they just cold box you. If you're not in the crowd, you get nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then I was tempted to go to the stupid IHOP myself. Almost did. Glad I didn't. Imagine if I'd erupted like this over there. Oh, Mike Bickle mightn't be preaching anymore. But you see, I already about Bickle. Bickle wrote that darn book, wasn't it, in 93, 94, called Passion for Jesus? Do you remember it?
Not really.
It turned all the boys into a bunch of fairies, man. That was when it was all about, the father's love, and we got all clingy and cuddly, and all the
Yeah.
men started. The blokes came back from America, bros, and they was hugging everybody and stuff. It was getting weird.
Yep.
They'd go to a conference in the States and they'd come back all real. They come back girly. It was
Kissy and
strange.
Prissy. Yes.
Yeah, that's the one, man. And it used to, like, I got nothing against that. Some of my good mates are Kissy and Prissy, and I love them. But nah, man, that ain't for the church.
Mm. Yeah, for sensational.
It was weird.
Yeah, sensational ministries.
Yeah.
Mm.
I got to get
So,
a copy. I've got a copy of it somewhere here. But yeah, it was a
okay,
weird one.
I'd like to get a copy of that. I'll read it out.
And see, that was when Paul Cain was
Yep.
one of the big players.
We would have been very big on that theology for a very good reason.
And Booby, what was his name? Booby Bob Jones. Bob Jones, the one that got busted for asking women to. He was asking them to reveal themselves with prophetic words from the Lord.
Yep.
Now, why wasn't he shut down? Bickle continued to support that.
Yeah, they moved Bob Jones to Tikkun International, by the way. There's a document that has that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, give me a demon
That
slayer
was a
bucket,
good
please.
sidetrack. That was a good segue, bro, to get me out of that state of mind that I was in. Thank you. Sorry, folks. We're pretty much past the SA bit now. I had my breakdown.
I'm just trying to figure out on the fly how to land the plane because I could see the spiral a bit. I'm thinking, let's just go somewhere else a bit.
Hey, it was funny. Can I tell you something too that's very interesting? You picked on it pretty well. When I'm having the interview with the police officer, I was talking to her, and she actually got privy of watching me shut down. It was about 4 hours and 20 minutes into the interview. And I turned to her and I started to stutter. And she looked at me. She said, "Are you okay, Eric?" She says, "It's like I watched the blinds go down on you." And I had to, that was it. My brain literally just went, but you got it before it crashed. Well done.
Oh.
I was a wreck for 3 weeks after that interview. That was a big one.
I can imagine.
So
trying to recall everything. It's pretty hard because you got to go back into your trauma. That's not fun.
Yeah, it's going to happen again. It's got to happen again. It's going. Lawyers are dealing with it now, so that's all. That's
good luck with that.
Me at the moment. I'm dealing with a heat wave at the moment. I fish, I go swimming, I ride motorbikes.
Nice.
I'm like a teenager again.
Awesome. Reliving the years that you've missed.
And yeah, that was the thing, that whole thing about when I flipped out when I was talking about the serotonin. All through my youth, I just didn't get to enjoy it. It was like somewhere at some stage it got cut off because there's 10 people still listening. The abuse actually started when I was introduced to pornography at the age of 7. That was when the mental abuse started. So, yeah. Wow. Interesting. Oh, yeah, it's weird. And I have real, empty gaps in my memory that are just black. It's really bizarre, Jake. It's really bizarre. But that's cool. I sometimes think, too, that in itself is a blessing. Because if I can't see it now, I ain't going to go and try and find it. And if it ever does come back, and it's clear and I can understand. It'll be time for me to deal with it. I'm too old for that stuff. What's that guy? I'm too old for this.
Mm.
You get to that point. So I just want to help people now.
Yeah, cool.
And that's
Well,
one of the main reasons I'm coming out too.
well, that's a great segue actually, because I'm looking at the
Yeah.
time. We're going on for about an hour, maybe another half an hour max. But we've got some great questions now to talk about what people can do. So I've got here. What
Yep.
advice would you give to someone who may be currently suffering from the same or similar trauma that you've gone through?
Oh gosh. It's really hard because I would suggest reporting it, but obviously most people need support in doing that in itself. So where do they go? Like, I work and I'm also in contact with Jimmy Hinton over in the States. And there's a fella in Australia I deal with, Jacob Little, who is a cry for justice. No, about time for justice. And they have helped me help people. Like, they're a network, but they're a worldly network. We we may need to start it. You guys listening on the YouTube thing, you might be part of, but we've got to start something where we can have a network that's where people
Agree.
up, and if they need help, if they need somebody to hold their hand, we try our best to help somebody to hold their hand. It's like at the moment, I'm watching a friend in the States falling apart, man.
Mm.
The vineyard movement started in her lounge room, my brother. And to this day, she begs for bread and prayers on Facebook. What the heck? Is
Mm.
that how they treat their own? Where are we going to take people that we're going to trust to? That's the thing to do, see? They become like my kids and,
So
But anyway,
he
sorry.
gave some very good advice. Just trying to potentially report it straight away, but then you were saying it's more
Yes.
safe. Trying to find
Yep.
networks. I would just like to add, if someone is going through trauma and reliving some of the stuff in their heads, it's kind of good to like take note of their haircut, the clothes, um, uh,
Yes.
events close by to it. What were other people wearing? Do you remember other people there? And just writing it down and trying to figure out the date of it. Because
Yeah.
if it's alive and it's still there, you might as well write it down, stick it somewhere safe
Use
as
it.
evidence, and then
Absolutely.
that's one way of dealing with it. And at the same time, your brain might just eventually just go too traumatic, bang, and just shut down. But you've got a
Yep.
time capsule, and that can be incredibly
Yep.
important in the future. I would suggest that.
Great suggestion, Jake, because what I did when the police asked me about a particular house that I'd been taken to at one stage, they said, "Do you remember the place?" I gave them a darn detailed floor plan because I, at that time, remembered it. So I drew it. I said, "There it is. That's where this happened. That's where that happened." And they just went, "Holy, okay."
And
Do you know
I'm
what I
only
mean?
saying that because if you do come in contact with your predator again, and it'll your brain will literally start shutting down at some point in time because it becomes that traumatic, and it'll just start
Yeah.
as a coping mechanism, dropping memories, dropping this, dropping that. It can't cope reliving this stuff, and it's a safety
Yeah.
mechanism. That's why I would say it's really important to just relive it just one more time. Yeah, red collar, um, um, buzz cuts were in. Kylie Minogue song "Let's Get Physical." That was a really popular song at the time. It helps
Yeah.
really help detectives and people like that later
It's
down the
funny.
track.
It is. It
How
is.
it
It
how it
is so
fits.
true.
It's nearly
And
Easter
see,
time, and John Farnham was very popular then with his hit.
the one thing
Bang,
that
there it is.
the one thing that threw me, the police asked me, they said, "Do you have any photos when you were about this age?" And it was at a particular stage when somebody had actually asked me if they could take photos of them. And so now I'm thinking there's photos out there because they were taken already. They just needed me to confirm, was it me? Dealt with it. It was all part of the crud, and they were happy.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was weird. I had weird things happen to me.
Going back to that question as well, you told us how you were coping with the things that you went through, like drugs and various things like that.
Yep.
If someone is just trying to keep their head above water, what would you suggest? Just try and find something they like to do, or
I'm just trying to think when I was at my worst. When I was at my worst, I was working. Mundane, every day. I was milking cows, man, for 5 years after my real bad breakdown. And it kept me physically busy and it kept my mind. You know the old saying, the devil, what is an idle mind is the devil's playground? That can be one of your own worst enemies. Me, I tend to fill my void with very, very old sitcoms around the time of when my life was happy.
the void? I'm going to
You
start calling
know,
that the void. I like that.
the Drew Carey show, like I can watch the Drew Carey show and laugh my guts out and
I used
remember.
to love that as a kid.
Yeah, see, well, I was an adult, like
Mm,
Friends came out when I was in the vineyard. Everybody talked about Friends. I didn't watch Friends till I was about 40 years old and hate it.
me too.
But I can watch it and remember all the people that used to be talking about it because they were great people in the church. You know what I mean? It's weird. It's
Mm.
weird, but it's funny, you
I feel you
know.
have the sitcoms or other things that can actually just take your mind off that spiral.
Yeah, and I was helping a friend doing remote um, retrievals, forward drive retrievals when people got bogged on the beaches or would be going up for miles in the bush in this huge big truck to go on. It kept my mind busy. And I ride bikes too, and that's another great thing. As soon as you put that helmet on, man, it's just you and the bike.
Mm. Nice.
It's like you and me and Jesus. You know that cheesy saying? I might get one of those stickers, you and me and Jesus.
Mm.
That's a Cliff Richard song, isn't it? It is. It actually is.
Nice.
My gosh, now I'm showing my age. Anyway, I love Cliff Richard. I think he's awesome. Yeah.
We've got more
But
questions
then,
coming
yeah,
through. We've got more questions coming through. Can you speak to the role of community and support networks outside of the church that are now helping you and potentially helping you regain trust, if there are any?
well, the guy, I'm very, very lucky. Like I said, my doctor is a brother in Christ, and he is a solid fella. He's here to stay. He moved from Sydney, and I told you about what happened with the church up here. He actually went to the church that I was abused in Sydney 20 years after me. So he knows all the people that abused me. And he's my doctor. He knows all the story. And in that, I have great comfort in that he has shone. He is a brother in Christ who cares for me. He has tried with different sort of resources that he has minimal resources. I've been to, lecture, not talkers and stuff. I made one visit. I made 15 minutes, bro, and I walked out. He tried his Seventh-day Adventist stuff on me. I caught him. My discernment came out, and I got angry and walked out. But no, I'm sorry to say, my support, I'll be honest, comes from people like Jake, Kerry Ferguson, and Chris Roseborough. That's my network. That's all I have. And of course, you've heard my darling wife and my family, but they don't get to hear and deal with the
Your
messy
wife is
stuff
amazing, by the
because,
way. Your wife is
oh, she's a
amazing.
legend.
Just like, so yeah.
But
Talk about faithful, and I'm
uh,
I'm so glad and
yeah,
happy that God has blessed you with such a wonderful person like that in your life to pick you up when you're down and to
absolutely. And
leave you
see,
to your own devices. Pulling up
yeah, and,
trees.
and in that too,
That's
I get to care for her too when she needs it.
awesome.
And that's what I like doing,
Christian love at its
you
finest.
know. Yeah, I'll do that for the rest of my day, stuff the rest
Nice.
of it, you know. And that's it. I collect people. What's with that? Kids love me. They drive.
as soon as I hear a kid at Woolworths when I'm shopping crying and whinging, I want to put it in the freezer for 10 minutes to quieten it down. Honestly, you know. And all around here, I collect single mothers with babies who need help. It's hilarious.
If I see a child frozen in the freezer, I know Eric Peterson's close by.
I'll get them out. But that was the greatest therapy that was ever given me. The lady had been a midwife for 39 years. And I heard this baby crying one day, and she didn't know I was around the corner. And she went, "Oh, 5 minutes in the freezer would sort that thing out." Oh dear.
We've got about another
Gosh.
8 questions. We've got to fly through this as fast as we can.
Let's
if that's
go.
all right. What do you think churches can do to better support victims of SA, both immediately and in the long term? Like, looking back, you should have been able to see the biggest holes and easy holes to fill. What would you say?
SA survivors, or whatever you want to call them, us, people tend to think of us as too messy, too hard. I don't know why. I've never had an issue with anybody that's ever gone through this sort of stuff. I find them to be quite funny and have a really sick sense of humour, which, gets you through life. But honestly, today, the biggest thing that's lacking is the preaching and teaching of Christ crucified for us and our forgiveness of sins. There is, come on, man, let's go back to the basics.
That hit
That's
hard.
what we need.
And
That's what we need. Why do you think I listen into a Lutheran service, Kongsvinger? Because they preach Christ crucified for the forgiveness of our sins, man. You don't hear that. I never heard that in the Vineyard. Never heard it in Foursquare. Rarely heard it in the Baptist. I've been around, man. I've been in a lot of different COC. I was in that for a while. Gosh, that was just as bad. What's that called now? Inc. International nutty churches. But like I said before, I have had taken people to the police who had been abused in churches in this town, and have heard what happened to me through Jimmy's interview years ago. People come to me who'd been abused in the very church I was in for 10 years and accused of grooming kids, come out to me. They've been abused for 2 years in that church by them.
I don't know where to take them. It's an epidemic.
It drove me insane. I was blessed enough. I found out the police officer that harassed him the most, and I actually knew him. Senior sergeant of all the detectives. And he did the interview, and he saw a different side of this fella. Do you know that fella now is a totally different treatment he has been given by the police now? It's, "Hey, how you doing, bud? Get your helmet today," instead of, "Hey, where's your helmet? You will lock you up." Totally different man, just by that sort of support from people who are, he doesn't like them that much. And he has respect for them now himself. This guy used to roller skate, man, for over an hour to come to church from the bush. I'm pointing, and I'm not even know where I'm at. He's up there. It'd take him an hour on inline skates to get to church. That's a long way, man. It's a half an hour drive. A lot of big hills, So that, yeah, where do we take him? We get maybe if we start hearing Christ. Do I think
with the experience with churches that we know are just incompetent in this area, is it just safe to say as a church we don't have any experience, therefore potentially don't come here? Would that actually help in some ways, because they could be harboring people that they just don't know, and they're like
okay, so you mean like a bit of a
well, how could churches do better to support victims? It's good just to say we can't and we don't know how, rather than give the illusion that we have safe churches and we're trying.
You're more than likely find that you
it's either you are active or you're not.
Yeah, see, that kind of honesty would invite me into a church. The reason I started going to the church here in the local church in town, I walked in one day, there was nobody there, and I saw pews, and I sat down. I thought, oh, old school theology. I should be safe here. Sorry.
Okay. Next question. How can church leaders and communities actively work to create a safe environment for victims of abuse to come forward?
They got to stop putting stigma on, stop pointing the finger on. Oh, did you hear what happened to so and so? Just leave it as their business. Don't talk about it. Don't look down on them. One of the biggest things that used to and still does gripe me is when you see single mums in the church getting looked down upon by other women and stuff. That really ticks me. You know, who the heck knows how that child come about? Maybe the old man's dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People have got to stop being critical. You want to be critical? Deal with that at home when you get home from church with a cup of tea with the neighbours. You know, whinge about your tomato plants and the caterpillars. You know what I mean? Don't complain about the people in church.
Yeah, first world issues. You know.
We've all got enough problems. Yeah, acceptance. Who was it? They love acceptance and forgiveness by, he got kicked out of Foursquare for it. Can't remember his name. Jerry somebody. But yeah, he wrote a book called Love, Acceptance and Forgiveness. And it went too soft, but there is a point where love, acceptance and forgiveness needs to be forefront.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not easy.
So from a leadership point of view, they pretty much need to create the culture of just knock it off with the gossip of members.
Yeah. Mate, I can remember what used to go on in the talks in the leadership, and it's like, I don't want to know about that. I don't need to know that. You know, it's like they think it was like, what did they call it? Hillsong's Secret Sin Files. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Look, listen,
that
was in Foursquare. Foursquare Gospel used to do it too.
Okay.
They would have a list of past offences that could possibly bring discredit upon the organisation and the brand, and they'd keep that. You know, I used to say, what are they doing? Keeping it on you just in case you do something right. They're going to bring that out and kick you out. That's pretty much what it's for.
So how can church leaders and communities actively work to create a safe environment for victims of abuse to come forward? Don't keep sin files. Don't.
Yeah, don't.
That's terrifying.
That's obvious, you know. And when somebody speaks to you and talks to you about this stuff, honestly, one of the best ways is just in one ear and out the other. The majority of time that people have been through sexual abuse just want to talk. Like I said, we don't want fixing. It's like, you know, that's one of the biggest things with husbands and wives. When a husband hears his wife tell him something, why are we so stupid? We got to try and fix it. We just got to listen. She ain't listening. She gets more angry because then I try and fix the problem instead of listening, and she's already got the solution. Just didn't talk through that. You know what I mean? It's sometimes that's what it's like. A lot of abuse victims have the solution. It just doesn't come out of their own mouth yet. If they're getting immersed in scripture, you know, it's going to bring stuff up and they're going to heal. They're going to, you know, get on with life. They still got families to raise. Do you know what I mean? Husbands to deal with, wives to deal with, in-laws. And some of them may never, ever know about it. And that's the hardest thing too, because you've got to be... it's smart to be selective in who you tell. Not that you're trying to hide it, but you don't just go and tell everybody, oh, I was a sexual abuse victim. I told nobody. There's a time to talk about it, and now's
it's
the time
demoralizing.
To talk about it. I'm old now. It's time to talk about it. It's time to help people. Let's do something before I go into my grave, you know?
Yeah.
I don't care.
People might find my view a bit controversial, but from a church leader and community standpoint, we need to make sure that people are going to be severe consequences of the law. if you
Yes.
approach a child and essay them. And just make sure that it's real, it's stigma. If you know
It needs to
anyone,
happen.
you need to do it. But just put the fire underneath the community's feet.
Yep.
Because as soon as they know one and you're kind of being grilled how bad it is, then it's like, I know my community's got my support because this is outrage. We need to be outraged with
Yeah.
this stuff. And I think we've really kind of backed off where we just can't judge anyone. We tolerate everything. No, it's good that we don't tolerate some things, especially something like this. Because I think that does actually encourage victims to come forward,
Yeah.
having that kind of
Some
outrage.
of the stories that I've heard personally, because they know me in the community, where I live, man, man, this place is and pedophilia, the predators are everywhere. And like it's the stories that come out, it's like a constant reminder for me now to keep helping them, because they're young and they should be able to go through at least 30 years of their life happy, not like I went through. You know what I mean? If we can help them while they're young, help them deal with it. It's like I can always remember people whinging about the kids on the streets here because they play footy down not far from where I am. And sometimes I'll be on the streets till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And people don't realise it's safer there for them. They don't want to go home. They're safe. There's street lights. There's old families up here that are close by, and everything ever happened. Like I've done it. I've gone and got my club at 7 o'clock in the morning and gone out there and protected people from idiots. We had 2 fellas next door try and attack them with axes, so I went and sorted them out and moved them on. We won't have that. We got to look after these people.
You do, absolutely.
You know, and that whole family, I know parts of the stories, they've been through enough trauma themselves in that regard. You know what I mean? It's like 4 daddies and 4 babies. That's how it works these days.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no solid families.
Mm-hmm. It is, actually. It is.
That
It's refreshing
a
as
lot
well
of
that they actually do work. That's quite rare these days. Okay,
my
so
earbuds telling me it's low battery.
another question. So not everyone will have experience in doing this the right way. What are some ways that congregants can support survivors, whether or not they are aware of their specific experiences with abuse?
Say that again, mate.
How can congregants support survivors of sexual abuse, whether or not they are aware of their specific experiences with abuse? I can think of one.
It's we used to what did they used to say in the vineyard? It's organic. It will happen. It's not something I don't think that you can, of course, create an environment for these people to be nurtured and cared for and loved, but it may not necessarily happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can create the environment, but the environment should already be there because you should be caring and loving and nurturing and caring for one another anyway.
True.
It's like that kid that comes over every weekend for a dinner. Nobody knows where he lives, where he comes from, but you just feed him anyway. You don't worry about it. It's only one more to the crew.
Well, I'll give you a circumstance. You got 2 friends coming to a church for the first time, and no one really talks to them. And you got your own little bunch of friends. No one really talks to your bunch of friends. And now you've got these 2 other friends. They're kind of talking, but then there's the woman over there talking, and you've got 2 people over there talking, having a cup of coffee. Okay, the service has just ended, and goodbye. They came, they listened, they floated around, and then left. That's generally the setting that you have, unfortunately. That's why I'm asking that kind of question.
Yeah, they used to
if someone
sit up
suddenly
next
just
to
said to
me.
you, "Oh, by the way, I'm a victim of SA." Coffee? Like, that's the response you might get, or otherwise, I should talk to pastor.
That's pretty cool. That I like that. That's something to give me something to think about. That'd really rattle most people if they just were told that, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Well, I've
I don't
experienced
know.
people going to a church and the entire community knows there's something wrong and they don't want to touch them. And that's Reformed,
That's not a
that's
church, then, is
Pentecostal,
it? That's
that's
not really a
Anglican.
church,
They don't
man.
want to know. They want to live happy, clappy lives. So
Yeah.
people do want to make a
That's
difference.
sad.
How do they do
That's
it?
not a church. It's
Most
not a
people, that's
church, is
Australian
it?
church 101 really now these days. It's really sad, but if, okay, I'll leave that question with you. We can come back to that another
just
time
to
if you
shorten
want.
that, I'm just going to shorten it. It shouldn't matter whether they're an SA person or just a normal person off the street or your daughter or your mother. It shouldn't matter. Everybody should be cared for and loved and nurtured the same.
Yeah.
That's the whole inclusivity of it. I know we do possibly, yes, mentally we need to prepare and give, an extra mile or two for them. Absolutely. But they shouldn't be treated any different, except at times when they say, hey, I'm going through a struggle. Can we talk? They will naturally do that in an environment that's safe. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just something to think about. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
I just got
The only
rattled there.
advice I can give to anyone who wants to be managing this the right way, if someone comes, hey, by the way, I was SA'd when I was 11 years old,
Yep.
this kind of environment. If someone does suddenly come to you with that, just try to free up the week and just see if they want a coffee and just hang and most importantly, just listen because
Yep.
people do church hop because they are that badly abused. For many, it could be that or it could be something else, and people just want to just get something off their chest and they just want to get it out because they've been harboring something that just
Yep.
needs to get out. And just listening sometimes is the best thing you can do for your neighbor, whether they see you again or not. So
absolutely.
okay, cool. That's just one anyway. I'm sure there's
Yep.
multiple things we could talk about and come back to that. My next question is, how can church leaders be trained to better recognize the signs of abuse and take appropriate action when necessary? If that's a bit of a tough question, we can skip it and move to the next one.
Yeah, next one, too big.
Okay.
That's a big
Okay, then let's scroll down. Okay, there's much more.
It's like a hungry dog, mate. It's like a hungry dog. It's going to come to you when it needs a feed. And if you are at church in an environment that preaches, yet again, Christ crucified for the forgiveness of our sins, you're going to get people coming that are hungry. They'll come.
Yep. And just to point out, because we preach this prosperity gospel or your best life now gospel or this narcissistic gospel, as soon as we hear something that's not nice, we're like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to deal with someone's pain. Ew. Why should I focus on that? I need to have good friends around me to make me succeed. That person's going to clearly bring me down. They're talking about SA.
Man, let me tell you something. When people cry, especially when they've been through this kind of stuff, they cry with all their heart and vigor, mate, and you get snot. You get covered in this stuff. So if you don't like snot, don't get involved in this sort of stuff.
Sure.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Just tell me when to. I'll just read through the questions and you can just tell me when to stop if you want to answer them.
Yep.
I've got here, what measures should churches adopt to prevent sexual abuse from occurring in the first place, especially within leadership positions? What are some specific steps or practices that churches should implement to support victims of abuse as they work through their trauma? I'm only asking you these questions because I know your story and you've gone through some pretty bad processes. How can churches foster? Okay.
This network we're talking about has been on my heart for years, and I've already discussed it also too, like with Jimmy Hinton, in training people in Australia, using his model, but adapting it to us Aussies. And we start to teach people about this around the country, but more so too is to actually be able to spot the predators.
Yeah, how to spot.
You want to keep them away from the SA, from the victims. That's what you want to deal with.
Yeah, one thing I learned about from the Royal Commission was the fact that they don't do things in secret. They don't do things when no one's looking. They go out of their way to find opportunities. They're opportunists.
Oh,
That's what makes it so
yeah,
sick.
absolutely. So yeah,
So,
yeah,
like, they could be in a
we
playground with
will
everyone
look at that in the
watching, and
future.
they're still getting off on something.
That's
It could be that simple, and you've got no idea.
yep.
Okay, so we've got the next question here. What are some specific steps or practices that churches should implement to support victims of abuse as they work through their trauma? Because some churches do want to regard themselves as safe havens, but I don't think they're equipped at all.
It depends on what are you trying to fix? You know what I mean? What is it that they think they're trying to fix?
Well, some people
We've
live in
been
the religion.
abused, we've been hurt, we've got issues. I don't think.
Would it be too much to ask you then to get an idea how Chris Roseborough has helped you? Was that too personal?
No, that's cool. Well, see, in that again, it's been the conversations and the discussions, and him having to listen to me snotting and boogering and tearing on the phone to him sometimes when I'm struggling. But that's the way it was. It was, yeah, Chris, we really need to talk. Boom. This is what's going on. But see, remember then, Chris ministry grew, and God gave me another victim, David Cathy. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
You know that name?
Does he know his name's? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
He's dead.
Okay.
David's dead. Rest in peace. Was one of the best mates I ever had. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can cut that out. It's all right, but it doesn't matter.
But that's fine as long as he's yeah.
He knew more than Chris because God gave me the opportunity locally, and that's one of the things too. Is that I know we have all these ministries that are really all over the place and international now, thanks to these YouTubies and all these Zoomies, and but nothing beats local, hands-on, in your face. How you doing, man?
Yeah.
Here's a cup of coffee for you. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or dude, like Jake, you left a bit of snot there, bro. Let me get that for you, man. I had a mate at the Prezi church. People used to think me and him were enemies sometimes because we'd be out the front arguing. But we were arguing about the text, we were arguing about the context, and then we'd go and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was so much fun. And that's what Dave was like. I was fortunate. Dave could handle it too because of where he'd been in life as well. So it made it easier. It is like that. It's hard to find local support. Man, you're not telling us anything we don't know there. Gosh, it'd be easier to find things too.
I don't want to reveal my hand in the work that I do, but sometimes it's really hard to get staff to give you feedback. And one thing I started putting out there was like, just give something anonymously, and we will answer your anonymous questions on the internet to help people figure out, that's how I can do better at my job. That's how I can report this incident. How helpful do you think it would be to have these anonymous questions being given to an organization that's trying to help deal with this, or a church trying to find resources, and then someone just anonymously says, I've gone through financial abuse at a church, or I've gone through SA at a church, or my child's gone through a horrific experience with a pastor.
That sort of stuff will help. That sort of stuff, I think, is helpful in with especially, why shush. Why have everybody dealing with the same thing everywhere? Especially, what do they call it? Networking. It's like, you want stuff, I can do things, but if I can't, hey, no, man, my brother over down the road, he knows how to fix that. That's cool. You know what I mean? It needs to be like but yeah, it's really, it's hard to explain. It is. It's a big question. You asked some really good questions, man.
Okay.
And I told you I didn't even have a gin and lemonade with me in this interview, so I'm really thinking now.
Okay, we can always do another one.
Oh, this won't be the first because I'm going to
Okay.
we'll go through some nitty gritties. It's
Okay.
time, and I'll get some folks that may want to talk, because there's one thing about this that I need to understand myself, is that whole SRA.
Okay.
I've never dealt with that stuff. Have you?
A little bit of it.
Yes, because I've got friends that have been through that, and I want to talk about that. That's so that's a whole different kettle of fish there, eh?
Sure is. And I was late teens when I was trying to help a lady with something like that too.
Yep.
I'll just say that much.
It's real. But
yeah,
anyway.
it is. 4 more questions. Feel free if you want to skip this one. How can churches foster a culture of transparency, accountability, and empathy to better prevent abuse and heal those affected by it? Next one. Okay. It's a bit tough.
What the questions are interesting, because what the questions are based around is what the church should be. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing.
Yes.
These questions are it's almost like they're based around what the church should be. So if we reverse the questions, we might have an answer in.
So I'm asking these questions because I've gone through my own church experiences that were pretty rotten, and sometimes I just get angry in my head. If only they did this. If only they did this. And so I'm just wondering if you potentially have ever operated from that mindset. If only they had this level of accountability by doing A, B, C, D. So that's why I'm asking these types of questions.
Yep.
I go into my own head.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Okay,
we'll
move on. Last 3 questions. They're just final thoughts. What do you believe is the most important message for churches to understand about the long-term effects of SA on their congregants? I think there does need to be some discussions about this.
Luck with them. We will drive you insane. But we do. We've got answers. We've got questions. We've got more questions and answers than most people have ever known. Once we get going, and that's the problem. Once we come out of that bag and you become comfortable within yourself, we're like nutcases. We really are. That was a big one.
So what did you say the most important message was? Sorry? Like I would say the gospel.
Got lost.
I would say the gospel is the most important thing. That's what churches are supposed to do. And I think we both agree on that. But on the topic of like let's just do a sermon and just focus on Numbers or Deuteronomy or Revelations or John, and this entire thing is there. People might know someone in the church. There could be another headlines just down the street of a church going through something serious. What should a church's response be to potential people in their church who've gone through it, or there's SA in that church? What is the message? It's pointless saying we want to do better, because snaps for the church trying to do better. Everyone wants to do better, but clearly nothing's changing. Clearly we're not helping anyone.
One of the greatest comforts that I ever took was when I embraced the fact that I may never behold this side of the grave, but in Him it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter, because I'm in Him. So
it hurts me to hear you say that. It really does. I'd like there to be something.
Jake. I'd love to chase whatever it is that's going to make me healthy and whole, but I ain't got time for that, man. I am just here. I am who I am, and I am happy and content in that I am in Him, in that mess and all, and He knows.
Okay. What happens if someone who's gone through this is sitting in the church and they're listening to a great message, and then their mind starts to go, "But why did it happen to me? Why me?" How about that as an important message? Why me?
Ooh. Yeah, that's true. That's a hard one too.
Because there's a lot of...
See, that's an angle that's an angle that I have not been able to understand myself, because through all the crud that I've been through, I've never been able to have that why me? Why, where was God when all this happened? For some darn reason, I've always been able to embrace the fact that it was just some filthy, rotten, sinless scoundrels that did it, not God. And it was,
You love me so much. Why did
if
this
it
happen to
wasn't
me?
going to be me, it would have been somebody else.
Yeah.
If it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. So I look back now and think, well, somebody else skipped out. Good on them.
It's a hard
But
question.
I'd
We
love
can
to
answer this another time.
It is. It is. It's a very deep question, that one, because you need to hear the. Excuse me, Lulu. You leave her alone.
Silly Lulu. Hope you guys are finding this
The
interview
neighbour.
enlightening and informative. Yeah, but
Having
it's a
guard
tough
dogs
question,
can
because
be.
the last thing you want is a cold-hearted Calvinist to go, it was predestined. As I've actually heard people actually say, you're like, dude, whoa, like, serious? That's a very cruel and disgusting God.
I heard them throwing that around when all that stuff came out about Steve Lawson, and I was livid.
Oh,
Regardless of
started.
what happened, the way that they threw that around, and they did the same, but not to the extent with my mate, Alistair Begg. Remember when he said something about going to a transvestite wedding for a grandmother?
Yep. That was horrible.
Dude,
The way that was
this will upset a lot of people. I'd still
I want people to listen to
sit
this.
under
I want
Alistair.
people to listen
I
to
love
this.
Alistair.
Important.
I love
message.
Alistair. I'm sorry, but I love Alistair Begg. You know, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But I never clicked with Steve Lawson, and it was nothing to do with anything but the fact of what he used to preach. He was just cold.
Yeah.
You know?
So you can have the cold-hearted Calvinist say something like that. You can also have the very charismatic Arminian going, "Oh, everything works out together to those who love God." So God loves you.
All things,
and it's just a flippant
work together for those that are called in. That was one of the classic ones they flogged to death. You know, and it was like, no, not all things work together. Some of them are acts of violence that need to be sorted. Do you know what I mean?
It hasn't worked together for me for his goodness, even though I love him. When's it going to get good? It's awful. And it's the mishandling of the actual gospel text. What we did, that was evil.
Yeah.
God has made for good by sending his son, Jesus Christ. That's the actual context of it.
I remember some of the messages I gave, mate. They were atrocious. I wouldn't even throw them at the devil's feet to be preached now. That was shockers. You know, It was just ridiculous. You know?
Last two questions.
Funny to look back.
Final two questions. Yep. How can the broader church community advocate for change and how abuse survivors are treated and supported? Oh, how can we do better? Elders.
Like, what's the word?
A good example
people
of this is
need
just
to
the KCC
recognise.
church. We just had a whole bunch of elders come out of their disillusionment going, we had no idea this was happening. And they want to do a good job now. They want to step up. Kevin Manning and Cameron Ross, they're beautiful people.
Yep.
And watching them just have that realization hit going, we want to advocate for victims, step up. It's people like them, those types of churches or leaders or elders. What can they do better?
Not do what they did to start with. I know it sounds ironic, but I'm just thinking here, you know, like we're almost trying to design a matrix for safe pays. It's just like that have been through SA need a safe place with crayons, but we just what you brought up. You brought up so many key points, man. I would love to throw them at leaders of the church, let alone me. Do you know, like some?
Well, the leaders aren't usually going to answer them, so you might as well talk to someone who's gone through it.
We'll ask the pastors that are going to bloody answer the questions. We'll ask Roseborough and people like that. They're the kind of people, like even as busy as he. You know, it's hard, but because that's funny. Like I know Kongsvinger through Chris, and just with how crazy it is, I'd feel comfortable going over there and living there and being part of that congregation because they're nuts. They're crazy as me, some of them. Not that they've been abused, they're just nuts. You can just tell. You know, sandpaper ministry. But yeah, the questions, gosh.
We'll get to the final question then, and I want to just maybe help see where I'm coming from.
Hot dogs.
So I am someone who does believe in healing and restoration of someone who's dealt with SA. Some people
Yep.
don't need it. Some people have got a thick skin, but others do need help. And
Absolutely.
I would say one of the most healing things that I've ever experienced is when people suddenly go, wait, it's not just me. It's not just me. It's not just me.
Yes.
Once people start to realize that it's quite a tainted thing all over the place, whether it be Mike Bickle or Gateway Church or Hillsong Church.
It's everywhere.
But there's like a freedom. You don't feel alone anymore. And there's a big,
Yeah.
and your mind's a bit more liberated. People can understand what I'm going through. To me, that is a start of a healing process. And when you start healing their stories, and you might be crying for them, there's an empowerment where I can say something, or that person can say something, and that person can say something. Now, it can go two ways here. It can go a spiral down, how horrible and sucky and disgusting and hot, like unredeemable everything is, and now we're just having a pity party. But there is that inspiration of like, hey, we're actually very proactive here. And now that we're talking it out and we're sticking together, arm to arm, it's a bit idealistic, I guess, but there is a real empowerment and freedom. And I've seen victims who were victims of abuse. I would think of the lady with Kansas City with that Tebut case. She is now going around and empowering and going, this is what you can do better. And so she has dealt with her stuff to the best of her ability and is now an agent to really go into churches and go, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. So those people are really inspirational. I'm not saying it's for everyone.
That's the same concept with Jimmy in teaching people in the churches. They're like, oh, we had no idea. And it's not their fault that they had no idea either. And you know what I mean? It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You know,
so that's the question. In your opinion, what would true healing and restoration look like for both the survivors and the church as a whole?
Yeah, you wouldn't know them. You wouldn't be able to separate the sheep. You wouldn't be able to separate them, mate. They'd all look the same. You know what I mean? They all hide scars under that fleece somewhere, and unless you're sharing them, you'll never know. And that's when you get to know people. Sometimes that's when. Could you imagine if I dumped this on somebody in the Pentecostal churches that I was going through? Holy dooly, they would have had a heart attack.
Goodbye, brother.
Oh, could you imagine it? No, you know what it would have been like? Oh, what a testimony. Let's milk it. Daryl Beedman's file. Remember him? 6 months. Hillsong abused him for. Gone. He was one of our best jockeys, by the way. Gets saved. They put him straight up on the stand and burn him out.
Yep.
Poor bugger.
That's what they do.
That's the way.
Style.
And they did that, you know, with that fella. This is the one that's really grinding me, man. You know that Nick guy with the guy that's harmless and legless? What's his name? Nick Karijovic. Have you seen him?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of him.
Dude, the Pentecostals are milking him. They're using him like a bloody.
Absolutely, they do.
It's
he's on
heartbreaking
a very lucrative tour constantly, milking it with the kids and milking it anyway. It's kind of like, yeah, good on him, but please don't.
What churches are safe for normal people? Hey, there we go. How about we start on a model of a church that's safe just for normal people to start with? That'd be good.
Good point. That's a very good point. Very good point.
I hope some of your pastors heard that.
It's called a denomination for a start, generally speaking.
An abomination. Yeah. What did they used to say? Was it man appoints, God anoints? That's what they used to say in the Pentecostal church. If you were anointed, you were appointed by God.
Yep.
So I don't miss any of that.
On that note, though,
anyway,
I would like to offer a hypothesis. denominations are generally safe because there are legalities and they have ways to look at to see if the person is actually qualified to lead. You've got elders and people like that who know the people that have grown up through their church quite well, so nothing's really escaped their eye. So Christ has instituted his church. The church is an institution. We've got our criteria, we've got our methods, we've got our
Yep.
rules that need to be followed. What's happened ever since the hippie movement is this idea that, like, there's the Jesus movement, and now you've got the charismatic movement, and you've got the growth movement, and you've got the prophetic movement and the apostolic movement coming in. And because everything's a movement with revival just around the river bend, and revivals hitting there and revivals hitting there, these things are now being birthed. There's no accountability structure because even Hillsong likes to consider themselves a movement. Christian City Church likes to consider itself a movement. And when there's a movement, there's no structure. They like the idea that God's just doing whatever he wants in that movement, sweeping people into the kingdom. And I've got a feeling that is where a lot of abuse can occur. Of course, it can happen in institutions. We saw that with Steve Lawson, but there were some warning signs.
Yep.
But going to this movement thing, would you actually say that a lot more is actually hidden, and a lot more stuff is getting away with because the end justifies the means to see a movement grow rather than actually a movement be healthy?
I saw some interesting things, like in Vineyard, and that the way that they used to try and manipulate people with marriages and things, and girlfriend, boyfriend, who should be seeing who.
Yeah. God told me you need to marry this person. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Houston did that.
That's, oh gosh, I remember having a fight once. I had the fight with the pastor, and I said to him, I said, listen, man, you keep this up. I said, she's going to be pregnant in 6 months. 5 months later, she came pregnant. I was off by 1 month. Drove him out of the church, you know what I mean? With that mentality, like we were talking about before. She was an abuse victim, and she sought comfort, unfortunately, in the arms of a boyfriend, and had for a while. They come to the church, and the first thing they tell them, oh, you got to move out, you're not allowed to live together. They hadn't even, and they're telling them all this stuff. And that's when I said to the pastor, she'll be pregnant in 6 months. And it took 5. Lovely couple, you know what I mean? They grew outside of that. As far as I knew, they got married, but nothing to do with the church because of that treatment. That's not a very nice place to go to, is it? You don't tell people how to live.
Yeah.
Those movements were very weird, and there was a lot of sexual, even if it wasn't there, there was the undertones of it. There was a lot
Sexual
of
tension,
intimacy.
I call it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, yeah. Like Paul says it specifically, don't awaken passion before it's time, for a reason. If you got a bunch of folks hormonal all together that are hugging and crying, you become emotionally attached to.
True.
There's emotional bonds that can happen. I think that's what happened to Todd, to be honest.
Good point. I talk about
Todd Bentley.
Yeah.
And Todd and Jessa, I think that's what happened with him, because I'm not, his missus wasn't into that. Jessa was. She was his secretary and an emotional bond star. And it's like the old saying, they used to, what is it, the Billy Graham rule. I think that's a load of crud, but don't be talking to the ladies behind closed doors on your own. That's just simple. Now, if you got Todd in the situation, and Jess,
now you got digital technology as well. Makes it even harder.
It's even worse, man. So you just don't know.
Another phenomena that's really happened in mainly the charismatic and charismatic churches. Pentecostals don't really do it, but the Pentecostals were calling out the fact that people were laying on hands to impart stuff. Look at the charismatic and the charismatic movement. They love to lay hands on you. In fact,
yes,
I was dealing with Kira Mitchell. She was the admin of Todd Bentley coming down to a church up here on the Northern Beaches. And she wanted to lay hands on everyone. And I'm thinking, I don't want her to lay hands on me as a charismatic. I didn't want her to do that because she just gave me heebie-jeebies. She pursued me. She wanted to lay hands on everyone. I took great offense that I did not want her to lay hands on me. It was literally a cat and mouse. And I would actually say there's a real sense of ownership when a man touches another man or a man touches another woman or even when someone like a Joyce Meyer or a Paula
Oh
White,
yeah, and
comes on all the
it's
event.
also too. It's like a. Sorry, I'm just plugging my phone in. It's having a conniption. And notoriety too, when people like that give you prophetic words, and it's weird. I don't miss it, man. I
don't
don't
know.
miss that stuff. I used to lay hands on people and nearly give them their whole life stories. There's a spiritual power in all this stuff that people don't realise. You know, we were mucking around with stuff. I can still remember it. People were, 100 feet away. You just pointed them and they'd go smack and hit the wall or the floor and stuff like that. It's a demonic
poltergeist
power, and that
anointing.
stuff's going to affect everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We didn't need to throw coats at people like Benny Hinn and push them over. You know, and that's what a lot of it is too. When you look at the way that the old Pentecostals didn't lay hands on that much, but the good charlatans knew exactly where to put their hands so that the people would fall over.
Yep.
So much fun showing people that. You know, it's like the leg growing. I can grow legs 2-3 inches. I can shorten
Can I cut your leg?
while I'm at it. Oh, we should do that. We should do the reverse. Go on the street and go, hey, one leg of yours is longer than the other. Do you want me to shorten this one? Because it will work, because you're only flexing the hips and all that sort of stuff. So you could short. That would be scary. Sorry, I just thought about that. I'm going to do that.
It'd be great if there's like a
3
documentary
inches.
going, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm going to change the world. I'm going to heal people, and every single healing's a fail. That'd be hilarious. I'd subscribe to that channel. So, guys, it's about, we've been going for nearly 1 hour, nearly 2 hours. It's now 116 minutes on the clock, so we've got about 4 minutes left.
Wow.
Just a bit of house cleaning.
Yep.
I'm not going to be putting up this video straight away. We've mentioned the name Kerry Ferguson, and I want her to watch this before we get permission to put it up, just so that she's happy with the way that we've talked about her. And also, unfortunately, there's a lot of comments. Thank you for commenting. I wasn't quite sure how to navigate that, so I've been reading all your comments. Some of them are quite eye-opening, and sometimes I look down because I've got a bit teary because some of you are sharing your experiences as well. So thank you for being open and sharing as well. I'm hoping to get this up after Kerry does respond. And before I finish, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wind up?
Hey, listen, if I'm the last resort, I will help you. If you're listening to this, you know, I'll do whatever I can. You know, I've helped people as much as I can overseas and stuff. I'll track people down to help you. I don't care. You know, it just takes a bit of effort. But yeah, get help. And thank you for listening. You know, you can tell my brain's shutting down now. I got to go feed some chooks and collect eggs.
Oh yeah, say hello to Cluck Norris for me.
Cluck Norris and Lurch. Man. Oh dear.
Okay.
And I've still got Grub. Do you know I've still got Grub? Do you remember Grub, the little duck that I had that used to follow me everywhere?
Yes.
Yeah, I've still got him. He's 5 or 6 years old, and I still can go out in the yard and go, Grub, Grub, and he comes up. But
one day
yeah,
he'll be your Grub.
Oh, dude, I can't wear tracksuit pants around Grub. Grub will chase me, and he honestly nearly ripped them off me one day. It was so fun. He grabs the leg of my pants and tries to pull them off. He's a naughty Grub. But yeah, that's how I deal with life too, folks. I have 5 dogs. I have too many chooks and too many ducks, and all the local birds seem to like coming here. So yeah, it's fun. All
so
right,
we've got about 1 minute left. So before we go, folks, if you don't follow him already, this is the Outback Berean, or as I like to call him, Outback Buffhead Berean, or Bearded Berean.
I won't say the breasted
Yeah, I
Berean or
humiliate
I'll
my
get in
guests.
trouble.
Nah, this guy's a sweetheart.
I used to be known as the breasted Berean, but that's a long story.
We're not going there. That's a sore topic. People still remember that.
Well, get over it.
Yeah. So I hope you've all found this resource important, inspiring, adventurous, and an eye-opening experience. We have to do better as Christians. We have to do better as
Yeah.
witnesses of our Lord Jesus Christ, and we have to do better in the church. So again, thank you
Yep.
so much for Eric Peterson for coming on.
Thank you.
And that was quite the roller coaster. So thanks for
I need
everyone
a
for
coffee
following on.
now.
And you've got no idea how thankful I am to be part of Eric's journey and Kerry Ferguson's journey and a lot of your journeys as well. It's been quite the roller coaster since I've met a lot of you since the Royal Commission, not the Royal Commission,
Oh yeah.
the
Been
Royal
a
Commission,
while
and
since you've
also
had
the trial with Houston. So
been a while since you've had those 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning phone calls, mate, eh?
yeah, no, that's still
I
happening.
remember I was a nut. No, but from me, remember about when I first got involved with, I was a mental case. You guys kept me sane.
Mhm.
You know, you, Kerry, and Chris, I was ringing you all manner of hours and times of the night, and it was just a blessing to have you listen. There we go again. Listen to Papa.
I've got no
Love you,
words.
Jake.
Love you too, mate.
Hey, 2
Stay
ears,
happy.
man. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Take care.
Okay,
Bless
see you.
you.
See you, mate.
I
And
don't know
goodbye,
how to
everyone.
end this.